Welcome to another episode of our personal empowerment audio series, Finding Yourself in Paradise. Hi, I'm Michael Benner.
And I'm Steve Snyder, and our program today is entitled, Why Settle for Normal? Now, of course, normal would be your goal if you think the only alternative to normal is abnormal, because we clearly don't want to be abnormal, but when we understand the other alternative to normal is exceptional, then normal is not really something we really want to become.
I've never understood it, the whole aspiration to be normal. Like you say, if somebody said that, we suspect that there's something very wrong about you, something very bad, you're defective or weak, or something's broken, or you've contracted an illness or something, and then, we were wrong, you're normal. Well, that's one thing. Whew, thank goodness I'm normal. But to aspire to be normal, to dream of that, to work your whole life, I think it's less about people who otherwise would do badly trying to aspire to normal. I'm more interested in the people who are brilliant, who deliberately dumb themselves down to be normal. The person that could do A's and B's in school easily, but they play dumb, they play small, they hide their light under a bushel, so-called. Why? To make other people feel better so they're more likely to fit in, to be liked by other people. What is this average common thing that people aspire to?
You know, in Australia, they call it the tall poppy syndrome, because if one poppy grows taller than the other, it's likely to get chopped off. So it's like hide your light under a bushel kind of thing. It's the concept of don't stand out, don't be exceptional or be noticed, because then you become a target. So the whole concept of be normal is like, where's Waldo? You know, like be one of those millions of characters in there and don't stand out, don't be different, don't be unique, like blend in. And I think that there's a whole concept of like enforcing that upon us that starts when we get into school. I mean, I remember being in school and you know, I was not normal. I was quite exceptional. I'd read like a whole lot of books by the time I went into first grade. And I remember school being for me like, you wait there until they catch up. You know, it's like, that's like until everybody, they want to make me normal by holding me back until everybody else catches up to me, or make other kids normal by pushing them forward so that they go faster than is comfortable for them to go. It's make the fast go slower, the slow go faster, make everybody go the same speed, learn the same stuff in the same way, be normal. It's normalized because, and of course, if you're not normal, they give you drugs to make you normal, you know, and like put on Ritalin to make sure you get normal. I don't see that being a good goal. Like making all of us the same is not a good goal. We don't need assembly line factory workers. We don't all do the same jobs. We don't need all to be the same kinds of people.
I think we're mixing up a couple of different models here. If the alternatives to normal are seen in one sense as, well, either superior or inferior, either better or worse than normal, well, that would be one thing. But to honor diversity and uniqueness and I love that phrase you coined recently about it's not how intelligent you are, but how you are intelligent. To recognize that every individual has their own intelligence profile, areas where they're more gifted or talented than other areas. And again, that's unique for everybody. So in a sense, how could we be equal? Equal rights, yes. Equal under the law, well, of course. But we're not equal. And to be normal is to say, well, I don't think of myself as superior, and I know I'm not inferior, so I'll settle for normal. And that's what we're challenging today. Have you been using limited to that kind of a model and thinking of yourself as normal when maybe what you mean is humble?
You know, I was sort of triggered to do this topic by reading a quote by Maslow, you know, the guy who did the hierarchy of needs. And he basically said, you know, after survival is handled and all the needs for caring and attachment and love are handled, then humans are supposed to be moving towards self-actualization. That's his basic concept. But instead we get derailed And
which is what? Realization of your full potential.
right, understanding who you uniquely are. Right. Not like how you're the same as everybody else, but actualize the self, the true higher self, who you uniquely are. And instead, he said, what we do is once we have our needs met, instead of going for finding out who we are, we go and get our wants met and try and keep up with the Joneses and try and acquire as much as everybody around us has because we think that's who we are. We get stuck in the idea of our potential. He basically called it a sickness. He said that in psychological terms, normal is really the psychopathology of the average. It's really the sickness of thinking that being average, being like everybody else, doing the same thing everybody else does is what you're supposed to be doing. And what you're supposed to be doing is finding out what's unique and special and actualizable, if that's a word, about yourself.
It wasn't long after World War II, the 50s really, where people, especially liberals or progressives, became especially concerned about conformity. I think you can see it before that, even in the early 20th century. Wasn't thought of much before that. But the concern about conformity and the dangers, really, in a democracy of needing to conform to some conventional wisdom, some normal centrist position, which is not nearly as strong or as resistant to change and growth as a more broad-based plurality where you have diversity. You see the same thing in nature. One of the dangers of commercial farming is by growing too few of a given kind of food. Let's say apples. If we only grow 8 kinds of apples instead of the 800 that are available, when this country, America, was discovered, so-called, by Europeans, there were 8,000 types of apples here.
Wow.
Now it's 800, about 8 of which are commercially farmed. Well, one blight or one fungus or one problem with changing weather that this particular group of species can't handle, and you could lose apples forever. Wow. They could be wiped out. They could become extinct.
Wow. And the semi-mythical Johnny Appleseed would be crying in his grave.
Well, there's a reason why nature is so diverse, why she doesn't want to replicate herself. She's constantly using trial and error. So part of this whole idea of wanting to be normal or average or common is to conform, to be just like everybody else, and then we all think the same way and generally feel in similar ways and act the same way. And if somebody comes along who wants to really be who they are, they've got to break out of this convention, and it creates a lot of pain. It really hurts people. We need to grow up, I think, as a race and honor our diversity more. Feel safe enough that we can allow other people, and especially ourselves, to push the envelope a little bit, to spread out, to, once you get your basic self-confidence going for you as a young person, to then really explore those outer limits of identity and have support in your friends and your family and society at large for, go out there, check that out, This is a universe that won't even replicate snowflakes, so let's find out what you're all about.
Well, and again, I put a lot of the blame on the school system, for making that such an incredibly important thing, to conform, to be like everyone else. I mean, they say, are you smart? But basically, are you smart at verbal, linguistic, and mathematical analytical things? They don't say, for example, are you smart at fixing things, or are you smart at dealing with animals, or are you smart at listening to people, or are you smart at figuring out, what the most important thing school needs to teach people is how to be smart enough to not do stupid things. I mean, that's a great skill, a great talent, but they don't measure it in terms of a test you take in school.
To think before you act.
There you go. That one skill, to think before you look before you leave. Yeah. So what I'm saying really is that the school system, by forcing us all to learn the same things in the same way at the same time, and to penalize those of us that learn faster or slower dramatically, or learn in different ways dramatically, I think that makes normal seem like the ideal, and being exceptional being a bad thing. I mean, Ian Anderson and Jethro Tull in Thick as a Brick said that we're geared toward the average rather than the exceptional. And I love John Lennon and said, you want to be normal in school because they hate you if you're clever and they despise a fool, and that's what you said, dumbing down, and then the great Bob Dylan line, I'm trying my best to be what I am, but everybody wants me to be just like them. I think the idea of being normal means to take all of your unique gifts, talents, and abilities and dumb them down. To take everything that would make you stand out or be special or be exceptional and to dim those parts of yourself. And I think that's one of the worst things we can do. And it's certainly moving in the opposite direction of self-actualization.
You know, it was only 100 years ago, 1902, that the father of American psychology, William James, wrote that the greatest discovery of his generation was that we can change who we are.
Just by altering our attitudes of mind.
And dreaming and desiring and pursuing a longing or an urge to do this or wanderlust or whatever. And before that, I mean, the entire history of humanity, people just thought you are who you are. And the idea of waking up to who you really could be and who you really want to be, I've seen this in my own life in stages. How full of myself I was as a young man, and how much of that was just putting on a kind of an act. I was this character, this role that I played and a lot of it was negative and cynical and smart-alecky, because I thought that's what intellectuals did. And nobody ever taught me really to check in and say, hey, what's really going on for you? You know, what do you really care about? And where are you sensitive? And again, I had to do a lot of personal development growth work to even feel emotional feelings in my body. And even today, we're at 2009, and we hear this debate in Congress about empathy, and should a Supreme Court justice have feelings, as if there's no intelligence at all available emotionally. Well, when we're emotionally worked up, when we're disturbed, there may not be any intelligence available, but as we calm those emotions deliberately and consciously, there is a side of ourselves that gets revealed that is so beautiful, that is so intelligent. This is where wisdom, of course, is found. So-called common sense is not common because it's hid in the calm heart, which is what we call paradise. This is central to everything that we're about with this series, finding that higher self, that true, unique individuality, nothing normal about it, in this level of thinking we call paradise.
And where you're likely to find yourself being normal is in your thoughts, because your thoughts are a lot like other people's thoughts.
That's a good point.
But where you're going to find yourself being absolutely unique is in your feelings. So that's the first place.
That is
really
true, isn't it?
Yeah, if you want to go figure who you are, you know, what you think could have come from somebody else, it probably was certainly influenced by other people, but what you feel, that's uniquely you, you know? And so I think self-actualization has to come. It's not about feelings, but the feeling is the portal. You know, you have to go through feelings, into feelings, more than into thoughts, into feelings to be able to get to the part of the awareness, the higher self, that really can become self-actualized.
You know, because of this dilemma, Jung, among other psychologists and analysts, tried to create a distinction between emotions and feelings, because you tend to feel an emotion in your body in much the same way you feel a physical feeling in your body, so they're both feelings. But is there a difference between an emotion and the way it feels in the body? Well, Jung decided he'd define it this way. He said an emotion is a response to a conflict in your life of some sort, adversity, an irritant. But a feeling is a response to a value. So I think what he might have been saying, or what I would say in a similar way, is an emotion is where you're all disturbed and all worked up. Disturbed is a good word for it. The water that is the archetype for emotions often is choppy, and there's little wind waves on it, and you won't see into that water. You'll see nothing reflected on the surface until the water is calm. Now you can see into it, and you can also see clearly what's reflected on the surface. So when we calm the emotion, then we get access to the subtler feeling underneath. And that's where I think we find the exceptional nature in each of us that mocks normal and common and average and says, let's go this way. I want to ask you about this too, because I think this is so terrifying to many people still. so frightening that a concept like anarchy, for example, is portrayed as violent. To be so free as to be without government, pure anarchy, or even something approaching anarchy where you have total freedom, the common person, the normal person, says, well, that would be violent. You know, they see anarchy and violence as going together. The anarchist is always out to try to... What about the libertarian anarchist? The live and let live. Just leave me alone. I'm doing fine. I'll leave you alone. Give me some respect. I'll give you some respect if you'll respect me.
The anarchist that will stop at red lights.
Of course, who recognizes a need for a modicum of law and order and certain social conventions, right? But I think that reveals our fear of being who we really are. That, oh no, that would turn me into, I'd just steal and do whatever I wanted if I was that free. Really? Do we need...
Yeah, I mean, that's the great question. Really? I mean, whether you believe in a higher authority, a higher power or not, whether there's a part of you that has this thing called guilt. You know, I mean, it wouldn't be created if there weren't part of you that knew better. There's a higher self. You know, blame it on something higher than yourself or the higher self or both. But bottom line is, you just, unless you're a sociopath, you just can't get away with hurting people and doing bad things, you know, without paying a price. Regret, remorse, there's a lot of pain that comes in the shame of doing bad things.
I think threats of prison...
That works on some.
And threats of hell and eternal damnation.
That works on fewer and fewer.
In the minds of most normal people are necessary to keep people in order, as if we do not have any internal code or guidance. You know, we don't have a conscience, so society has to threaten you with prison, and religion will make sure they underscore that with threats of eternal damnation and a lake of fire. Well, wait a minute. That's not why I try to be the best person I can be.
Right. And of course, this can all be subverted by bad parenting, you know, I mean, in bad environments in childhood. You know, you can train, you know, consciences out of people by being horrible, evil parents. But generally speaking, raised in a somewhat conscious society, in a somewhat conscientious society, you'll see the logical choice of choosing good over evil. People do it in every society in the world by huge percentages.
You know, another place we see this, Steve, I think is in cliques in high school, and there are similar groups in society, you know, the country club or the garden club or the card club or that particular group of men and women that you hang out with. Again, this idea of being normal and conforming is a way to be accepted and liked by other people. That's so important in the lives of many, I'll call them followers, because a leader doesn't really need that. A leader doesn't even care if he or she is being followed so much. They're just out there doing their own thing, and usually can attract like-minded people, mutual respect, but to knuckle under to that fear, to conform, to refuse to speak out, for example. I think we all saw it right after 9/11 when millions and millions of people in this country, tens of millions of people were in the streets of the world, all around this world, just before the United States invaded Iraq. And even though there were roughly 10 to 12 million people demonstrating that one particular weekend in April of 2003. Nevertheless, many people felt the same way but couldn't speak. They were afraid of being called unpatriotic, as if you didn't love your country, the way all military adventures tend to wrap themselves in flag and country. So if you oppose the mission or the venture, like, well, wait a minute, I'm not convinced this is a good idea. Is this something we really need to do? And those people are portrayed as unpatriotic. Well, often there is this fear of speaking up and speaking out, and that's tragic. I mean, the question I'm asking our listeners is there some area of your life, if not political, how about religious? Do you have questions about religion or the nature of the way our kids are educated in public schools, where you just really have an objection to normal, to common, to average, but you conform to it anyway because it's just too scary to speak out? Well, we'd like to encourage you to take a risk and speak out anyway.
You know, you talked about leaders and followers, and I think it really does come down to that. When you think about it, like, followers are always going to go toward the normal, and leaders are always going to move away from normal. So you have to be a leader of your own life, you know. And what that means is you don't, like you said, you don't have to have followers to be a leader. What it means is you have to make choices. You have to make choices. Now, we all make choices, but when we follow, we make choices by default. We make choices because someone else made the choice and we're following them, so we're following that choice. That's not really, it's making a choice, but it's really putting it on default and following. And following is never about becoming unique or special. Following is always about being a sheep. It's about being in the crowd. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't areas in your life where it's easier to be a follower, maybe even most areas of your life. But if you are not choosing to be a leader in any area of your life, then what you're doing is allowing yourself to not express your uniqueness, not express your other than normalness. You know, I mean, that doesn't mean you can't conform in so many areas, but you've got to have a quirk. You got to have a specialty. You got to have a talent. You got to have at least something that comes out about you that separates you, that makes you you instead of one of them. You know, what is it that makes you so much special you?
I used to have a Gary Larson cartoon on the wall right above my desk for years and years. In the 80s, I had this.
The Far Side.
Yeah, I remember Gary Larson, and it was a flock of sheep.
Oh, I remember this one already.
Do you?
I think I did.
Probably saw it on my wall. And they're all grazing except for one way in the back, and this one sheep is standing up on its hind legs, waving its front legs as if it were a human, saying, "Hey, we're not all sheep." And what I loved about it was, well, of course you are, right? And it forced me to look at those areas in my life where sometimes it's just easier not to kick up that dust. It's just easier to keep your mouth shut. It's just easier to, again, conform. And yeah, I understand that in a lot of areas of our lives, but darn it, there are those areas of our lives that are important, that are significant, and we're going to have to take a risk if we're going to follow our hearts, follow the dictates of our conscience, and be who we really are. There is nothing extraordinary to be found in normal. In fact, we call it common and average. Let's look at how negative normal is. Normal is filled with people who can immediately tell you why something cannot be done. How many people who can tell you what can be done would be described as normal? I think those people of vision and optimism and enthusiasm by their very nature are not normal. So that would be something else we give up to conform to being normal, is this sense of thinking for yourself and being free to have positive visions and goals and dreams and then follow them up with deliberate action.
I mean, if you take a look at normal from the point of view of, here's all the things that I do and am, and here's the things that I'm worse than other people at. And if I focus on all those things, then I could get to be normal. If I'm the things that I'm worse than everybody else at, if I can get to be where everybody else at, then I'd be normal. But in doing that, I'm not putting any attention on those things that I could be way better than other people at, and I'm not developing my gifts, my talents, and my abilities. So by doing what school does, basically, is making you focus on what you don't do well, instead of giving you the opportunity to focus on what you do well. You normalize, but you conform instead of create uniqueness and creativity. By focusing on what you don't do well and making what you don't do well normal, that's how we normalize people. But we don't normalize them by focusing on what they already do kind of well and make them do it brilliantly. That's not normal.
You know who has this down to a science is the military. That's exactly what they're about from day one, is making you normal. First thing, everybody gets a haircut.
They get to pick the normal, but yes.
Well, yeah, but they determine.
Yeah.
The Look at the word uniform.
Yeah, exactly. Uniform, exactly.
It's not just some clothing, it's a uniform. It's the same piece of clothing that everybody wears so that nobody is distinctive. They lose their individuality.
And their GIs, their general issues, their numbers, the idea is to get your hair cut exactly like everybody else's hair is cut and be conform.
It's not the only way to do teamwork. We can think of a lot of better ways to do teamwork, but it creates an instant sense of, I'm giving up my individuality to be part of the group. And that's why patriotism and militarism and even jingoism can be promoted. It's kind of like team spirit on steroids, where I'm now part of this group, but I've sacrificed my individuality. I always thought it particularly odd that in the United States you have to give up your basic liberties to join a military institution designed to protect and defend those very liberties.
Yeah, and I'm not saying we shouldn't have a military, but we should all want to not have one.
And you can't really run a military by democracy.
Clearly.
Let's debate whether we should take Hill 437. I understand that. I'm just saying that to have that mentality and to study it as a science, it's a science of creating a uniform mentality. Again, you're creating followers now. No room for leaders.
Yes,
here.
Sir.
And like you said, I suppose we've always needed a military. How long we'll continue to need a military and what will be its mission in the future.
Yeah. Let's just hope that we could all agree that we would like to not need one. That we would all like to come to the place where there's never a need for a military anymore. Whether that happens or not, if we can all get on board with that idea. That,
violent war.
Yeah.
Jim Channon had a great idea. I interviewed this guy years ago, Lieutenant Colonel at the time. Jim Channon, he said, we need a new mission for the Pentagon. And it got some traction. He called it the 1st Earth Battalion. And the idea was to begin to anticipate that the world is going to become more peaceful and more cooperative, and that rather than just eliminate the military altogether, you can eliminate the weapons, but you give the personnel a new job, a new mission, like rescuing the people after Katrina in New Orleans would be a great mission. That's part of what the National Guard is ideally about, but it could also be rescuing the environment. It could be planting trees. It could be fighting fires. It could be building trails in national parks. It could be a lot of things that we can do to move this uniform group. I don't want to get too far afield here. This is what we're talking about. Paramilitary nature of the police. You have the same thing. You have a uniform. You have school uniforms. Why? Well, the faculty and administration will say we want everybody to be normal. We don't want one kid to stand out because his parents are buying him really nice clothes and another kid is wearing jeans and a ratty T-shirt because they have no money. So this is a problem. In Africa, there are millions of children that cannot go to school because they have no money for the uniform, right? So it's outlawed being yourself, to be who you really are, rich or poor or whatever. I think where we're coming from, it's understandable we'd be that way, looking at our history as humanity, but let's be clear about what the future looks like. We've got to be moving away from these kinds of uniform conventions. Where appropriate, fine, but the emphasis, I think, clearly has to be on exceeding normal, going beyond sea work, based on the fundamental idea that you and I promote here, Steve, which is that everybody is exceptional in some way or combination of ways. You may be better at me in this area, and I'm better than you in another area. You're more gifted here. I'm more talented there. Equal before the law, of course. Equal opportunity, no question about it. Equal in that sense, but as diverse as could be at the same time. We got to find the balance point in that paradox.
Yeah, I think we know as babies to be unique. I mean, we don't conform. We just try all kinds of different things. I think it breaks down with the first parent saying, why can't you be like your brother? Or, why can't you be like so-and-so? And all of a sudden, like, being who you are isn't okay anymore. Now you're supposed to be like somebody else. And so parents, pay attention. Those kind of statements are very powerful to children. Why can't you be like so-and-so? All of a sudden, who I am is not good enough. Who I am... Not only am I confused by that statement, I don't know how to be like so-and-so. I mean, it's not inherent inside of me to be like so-and-so. I got to work real hard to figure out how to be like so-and-so. It certainly doesn't come naturally.
That's funny. I think of the, is it an Eagles line? I know my life would look all right if I could see it on the silver screen. A lot of our concern here is how we appear to other people. This exaggerated concern about the appearance of things, again, that's not very substantial, to be concerned only with how you appear to other people. That means you only go as deep as being interested in how they appear to you. But what is substantial? What is really substantial about a person? And are you willing to take a look at what is substantial about you? What goes deeper than appearances of being physically attractive or young or strong, six-pack abs, a perfect figure, the best clothes, the nice car? Does that really matter? Well, of course, to a certain degree it matters. How much does it matter compared to character, compared to values, compared to ethics? And now, would you want to be normal in terms of these things? It doesn't even make sense. Where do you stand ethically on this issue? What about your values? What kind of character do you like to present to the world? What's the truth of your nature or your character? Do you aspire to be normal in those areas? I don't think so. That's what we're talking about. Why settle for normal in ethics and values?
Yeah, because what you think about isn't nearly as significant a way of finding out about yourself as what you care about. And so if you want to be different than normal, other than unique and special and the best you can be, you're certainly not going to be normal. You can settle for normal in some areas of your life. You can settle for less than normal in some areas of your life. For me, I take a look at myself, and there are certain areas where I'm way below normal. I mean, I'm way worse at sense of direction than your normal average person. You give me a watch and ask me to take it apart and put it back together, I'm way below the curve, way, way below the curve. And other things I'm extremely exceptional at. Well, to be normal, I would have worked on those things I was bad at and not developed those things that I'm so good at, and I would have become normal, but I don't want to be normal. I love being exceptional. Nobody calls me normal. Nobody's ever called me normal. I've never been normal. And I remember in the earliest days of school when I noticed my mind worked differently than other people's minds, I reveled in that, and I didn't like being punished for it. It's wrong to try and make children all the same, and to go as far as to give them drugs when they have these exceptional behaviors. We do need to teach them values. We do need to teach them ethics and morals. Somebody said an interesting difference between ethics and morals. An ethical man would know it's wrong to cheat on his wife, and a moral man wouldn't do it.
You can be normal without being ethical, but if you're ethical, you got to go beyond normal. It would be unethical to settle for normal.
Really, and immoral at that. So you don't have to be supranormal or exceptional in every area of life. In fact, the truth is you couldn't be.
Of course.
But it's so important, I think, to find those areas where you do have gifts, talents, and abilities and develop those, and to enter through the realm of what you care about rather than what you think you should be doing. To enter through your emotional nature more than through your intellectual nature. We think so much like each other because we all use the same language in essence. We all have to conform to these things called words. Words are very limited in terms of being able to explain what really is going on. But feelings are very much bigger, much grander, much more richer and deeper, and it doesn't matter if they're hot feelings or cold. They use the water analogy for emotion. If the water's churning, whether it's ice cold or boiling, it doesn't. Cold emotions, hot emotions. If it's calm, doesn't matter what the emotion is. If it's calm, you can see deeply into it, and that's a great metaphor. So that's the first step. The first step to becoming different, becoming not normal, is to be calm and look into your emotions and tell you what they uniquely tell you about you.
What
do you care about?
Let's do that now.
Yeah, let's do that now.
Why don't you get comfortable, pump up the pillows, do whatever you do to get ready for the guided imagery exercises that we include in every single one of these programs. In a way, install some of the lessons, some of the key points of our instruction in these deep levels of relaxation, the alpha brainwave level, if you will, a level of focused passion that we call paradise, where you find that higher self in the state of feeling really safe and relaxed. So sit up straight, put your shoulders back, take a few nice, slow, deep breaths, and begin to relax.
Recognize that over the last 30 so minutes, you were probably in alpha a lot, paying attention to us and nothing else, but your mind wandered here and there, and other things took your attention, diverted your attention. But now we're going to go from wide awake to a place of much more narrow awake, and close the eyes, shut out the visual input, take a deep breath, releasing slowly, and let the mind know you're absolutely safe. And with the second deep breath and that release, create the mind's eye, that paradise, that place of perfect peace, and let physical tension release, anxiety abate, and confusion is completely gone. Relax.
Imagine a pool of water, a small lake or a pond. In fact, I bet you could easily imagine sitting on the shore, or maybe in a little rowboat out in the middle of this little lake or pond. And the water is a little choppy. There's some wind blowing. And you look down, and because the water is a bit choppy, rather disturbed, you're not able to see into the water. Otherwise, it might be very clear water, but for that disturbance on the surface, you're not able to see into it. Nor do you see very well that which is reflected upon the surface. But as you continue to breathe, even now, allowing Steve and me to guide you through this experience, watching yourself, feeling safer and even more relaxed. Imagine the surface of that little pond slowly grows more and more still. Little by little, those wind waves become fewer in number and less in amplitude until, little by little, the surface of the pond becomes undisturbed.
And as the surface of the pond clears like glass, what you can see clearly beneath the surface is what you care about the most. Your greatest loves, concerns, passions. What means the most to you is what individuates you and makes you so unique. And through the clear, glass-like waters, even as I speak, what you care about most becomes most clear. You can push away the doubt, you can push away the fear, and what you care about most, what touches your heart, that appears in your mind. And that's where you start to see how unique and special you are. Focus on what you care about, and you can leave normal far, far behind. Focus on what you care about, find what's unique in your heart and in your mind.
And if seeing into the water, when the surface is smooth as glass, is seeing into your feelings to find the exceptional that goes way beyond normal, common, and average. Notice how easily you can also see reflected upon the surface of that undisturbed water that which stands above you. In particular, imagine the sun itself. But you're not looking directly at the sun. You see its reflection on the surface of the water. And this is the higher self. This is beyond emotional feelings. This is the exceptional self that stands behind thoughts and even feelings. Accessible only when the body is still, the mind is quiet, and the emotional nature, the waters, are calm, undisturbed, and smooth as glass. This is the source of inspiration, of revelation, of realization, of actualization. This is where we go beyond emotional intelligence to find who am I really and what am I for? And why does it matter? And what do I do? And how do I go about it? Unanswerable questions that you will ask again and again and again to naturally grow beyond normal and common, for you realize you had been arguing for your limitations, that you've imprisoned yourself in conformity, and you're willing to cast off those bonds, to drop that yoke, and to explore the frontiers of who am I? Through calm emotions, look into the water, and a sense of a greater mission and purpose. See what's reflected upon the surface of the water, and reach for that, aspire to that. This is not the desire to be superior in the eyes of other people. This is not desire in terms of more money and more things. This is aspiration to be more of who you truly are, so that we can live fully and freely, to express ourselves in an ever-unfolding dynamic process of realization, and never have to worry about leaving this life with songs unsung, with dreams unrealized.
So through the portal of your feelings, you do the emotional healing, so you can rise to see through your higher self. Recognize what's special. Recognize what's unique. Recognize the gifts and the talents that you seek as you turn your attention to see, by asking the question, what's special about me? And as what you can do comes through, you recognize that being like everyone else is a compromise. And you want to be who you can be. You want to be unique. You want to be special. You want to be different, exceptional. You want to become the best you can be.
So dream a dream right now. Could be in any area, any aspect of your life whatsoever. Might be about relationships, maybe career. Could be levels of prosperity, as freedom and opportunity to do things for other people. Look to your nature, to the longing, to the appetite or the urge that's been there all along, and, well, you've just been ignoring it or cashing it away, pushing it aside, hoping it would go away. Instead, look at it now. Yeah, the dreams you gave up. Resurrect it right now. Trust your first impression. And see yourself going beyond normal and common and average in this particular area or set of areas. Risking taking the steps in that direction, even if you're unsure. The entire strategy doesn't matter. Take a step in that direction. Consider that it's just possible, in fact, perhaps even likely, that whatever is your sense of the universe, of your awareness, your consciousness, your being, that a real dream, not just a wish or a fantasy, but a real vision could not possibly occur to you without you having the means to attain it. What if life is rigged in that way? All you would need to do then is separate frivolous fantasy from the dream that is a vision quest. To honor that longing, just as a flower longs to know its source by turning daily to the sun and tracking it across the sky, so anxious it is about receiving energy and support from its source. Do the same thing. Follow that longing in you, that urge to be more than you are, to realize the truth of your being and leave common, average, and normal far behind.
So the answer lies through what you feel and what you care about the most. Explore those questions of what is real, and you'll find that you can coast right to the answer of what is unique and special about you. It's really an easy thing to find out. Just ask, and the answer will come through. It's asking and listening that's really the key, and not thinking and trying to figure it out. It's not wondering or contemplating or being confused. It's not focusing in on the doubt. It's just knowing that focusing on what you care about, and the answer will come through. Just relax and become the unique you. The higher your level of stress, the more you'll be like others too. The more you relax, the more you will come through.
Reorient yourself toward the sound of our voices. Imagining, remembering where you are and what the world around you would look like in a moment when you open your eyes. But take these few moments to first reorient, to tell yourself that you can bring with you gently, effortlessly, the insight, understanding, and enthusiasm that you've created in the past few moments. Indeed, in the whole program of instruction here today, about transcending, moving beyond normal, common, and average. Bring that with you gently into the waking state as you now take a slow, deep breath and fill your lungs. Hold for a moment, and now as you exhale, feel a letting go, and open your eyes now, wide awake, alert, rested, refreshed, feeling really fine, with a nice full memory of, I'm willing to take that risk, I like that, I'm ready now in my life to go for it.
Now, it's okay to be normal when it comes to stopping at red lights. It's okay to be normal and not anarchistic in every area of your life. But it's not okay to be normal when that's the theme of your life. You want the theme of your life to be about being special, unique, and that one-of-a-kind being that you are. So for me, I guess the major lesson here is that you find out about what's unique about you through the portal of your emotions more than to try and figure it out with your intellect.
Stephen, I want to thank you for being supporters, contributors, subscribers to FocusedPassion.com. And if you haven't been back to the site in a while, be sure to do so. If you've lost your password, that's never a problem. Just enter your email address in the forgotten password field. You get a new one mailed to you right off the bat. Come on inside. You can use the built-in player. I know many people listen with their RSS reader in the browser of their choice, or a lot of folks love the iTunes system. That's easy to do too. But right below that built-in player is a gadget you can use to forward your favorite programs to people you know who need this stuff, who are really looking for this kind of information. There's a lot of desperation, depression, sadness, and fear in the land right now. These are difficult times for so many people. Help them to see the opportunities in the darkness that you see. This is when there's greatest, darkest just before the dawn. Let's get on board with that. It doesn't cost you a nickel, and it'll take you no time at all. Bring that friend's email address to that little gadget. Send one to a friend. Plug in their name and email, and off it goes. We'll handle the email for you, and it's a great way to pay it forward, to spread the word, spread the good news that this information and personal development is available. Help your friends help themselves at FocusedPassion.com. Do it once, and I bet you do it again. It feels good. I always like doing it.
I like doing it a lot. It's not easy to be exceptional. I mean, the whole world is sort of conspiring to help make you normal. Like I said, Bob Dylan said, I'm trying my best to be what I am, but everybody wants me to be just like them. You have to deal with the fact that everybody wants you to be just like them, but you need to be true to yourself. And I think the theme of all of it is to help yourself. Help yourself to finding out who you really are and help yourself to becoming who you really could be.
As always, be gentle, love life, and take care of each other. For Steve Snyder, this is Michael Benner. Aloha from Maui.